Well, welcome back. Hope that was a good little break for you. Let's go right back into it here. Now, I want to mention something to be aware of. I'm going to continually refer back to Book of Revelation. I'm not going to pinpoint all of these things. I'm going to show you the characteristics. You know the language. I want you to go and search it out. When we talk about the cup of his wrath, the winepress, okay? The themes that go in Revelation have to do with Babylon and the destruction of the city and the harlot. There's mention of the goddess and Jezebel in Revelation 2, 18 through 25. There's mention of Esau, the tribal peoples, and the distress all around the world. These themes run through Revelation, okay? As you know, and the prophecies point so directly that I hope you've listened to episodes, I believe, 9 through 13 or something like that, 14 maybe, where we spoke about Revelation in detail, and all of these concepts came out. So please go back and recheck or get into your Bible, open them up, start to look for these things that I hope you've marked them off, okay? So we just saw before we closed out that he says, I will call for a sword upon all the inhabitants of the earth. All. Not a couple. Not 1,500. 2,500. All. Saith the Lord of hosts. And he says to Jeremiah, now, the Lord speaking, therefore prophesy against them all these words, and say unto them, the Lord shall roar from on high. The Lion of the tribe of Judah. Lions roar, don't they? Okay? And utter his voice from his holy habitation. He shall mightily roar upon his habitation, and shall give a shout as they that tread the grapes. Remember, these grapes, the winepress of his wrath. It's going to squeeze them like grapes. That's the pressure against all the inhabitants of the earth. And then we also read in Revelation where it says there was a noisome buzz, and men were cursing, and boils, and they were burnt, and their skin erupted and everything. And it says it right here in verse 31, a noise shall come even to the ends of the earth. For the Lord hath a controversy with the nations. Controversy. Ain't seeing eye to eye. And he will plead with all flesh. He will give them that are wicked to the sword. You better think about what wicked is, what evil lurks in the world today and always has. He says, the sword is coming for you. The word will convict them. More so than that. Well, he says, thus saith the Lord of hosts, behold, evil shall go forth from nation to nation, and a great whirlwind shall be raised up from the coasts of the earth. Okay? Now, it says in verse 33, and the slain of the Lord shall be at that day from one end of the earth even unto the other end of the earth. Well, the earth is 25,000 miles around the equator. Okay? And they shall not be lamented, neither gathered nor buried. They'll be like dung on the ground. We read that in Revelation. And just to be sure, let's go back to verse 27 where it says, therefore thou shalt say unto them, thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, drink you and be drunken. The word drunken here means whored up, whored, become like a whore. That's the word in Hebrew. I have no apologies. That's what it says. You got to think about what's going on here. There will be no lament. People will die. Just as in Revelation, as in Daniel, you have this 7-month period. And he says, the shepherds are going to howl and you're going to cry. And you're going to wallow yourselves in the ashes. Remember, wallowing. Remember that word. We use that word. It's what the word Syria means. Wallowing. We're going to get with it anyway. In the ashes. Well, where do you get ashes from? Well, ashes are the result, or the consequence, or what's left when a fire burns everything up. Now we know that Revelation tells us that everything's going to be burned. The mountains are going to be flattened, the seas are going to be dead, and it's going to be all burnt up. And then we're going to start over. Yeah, that's what it says in Revelation. Going to start over with a new city. And all the people that never had the opportunity to hear truth will be in the first resurrection. And they will hear. Every person that ever lived that died before the Messiah or died after the Messiah but had no revelation of the truth of the word, they got to have a shot. They got to have one shot. And that's what's going to come. But first, all this other mayhem, calamity, plagues as it's called. Remember, in Hebrew, the word plague in the Middle East can be anything. You could be a plague, I could be a plague, this wire could be, headphones could be a plague. Anything that's disruptive takes you off course, causes destruction, problems, havoc, mayhem, like I said. Calls a plague. It doesn't have to be locusts and doesn't have to be boils. It could be anything. Anything. And believe me, it's a common. Wallowing in the ashes, you principal of the flock, for the days of your slaughter and of your dispersions are accomplished, and you shall fall like a pleasant vessel. And its shepherds shall have no way to flee, nor the principal of the flock to be able to escape. For he says, a voice of the cry of the shepherds and a howling of the principal of the flock shall be heard, for the Lord had spoiled their pasture, and the peaceable habitations are cut down because of the fierce anger of the Lord. The day of his anger and his wrath spoken of. We've spoken of it many times, again in Revelation. Now here we go. The very last verse in chapter 25 says, in verse 38, he hath forsaken his cover as the lion. All right? Very important to understand the distinction of who the Messiah is and what he can and can't do in the different roles that he was put into. He says, for their land is desolate because of the fierceness of the oppressor and because of his fierce anger. Okay? The lion removed the cover of the king. Now, when we talk about the Messiah, we have said that there are manifestations of him, like Melchizedek. And he's also called the Messiah, the suffering servant of Isaiah 53. He's called in Judaism the Moshiach ben Yosef, the son of Joseph. Well, Joseph was an interesting character. Joseph was not the king, but he was the prince, eventually, and in a sense. And Joseph was cast out by his family, put into prison, and he came out of prison and rose to a great place of distinction in the king's court, such that, through his own sacrifice, he could save his family, who didn't even know him. He embraced all those that betrayed him, and he saved what Jacob feared the most, the loss of his youngest son, Benjamin. We know Benjamin means the son of the right hand, the bloodstone, the final jasper, and high priest ephod is for the tribe of Benjamin. So we see that Joseph, as a picture of the Messiah, the suffering servant, he could not rule and reign, okay, because he was not the Mashiach ben David, the son of David, the king. So the two roles that the Messiah has, three roles, as I taught you: the high priest forever after the order of Melchizedek, the suffering servant, the Messiah, who people always say, well, you know, if God was so tough, Jesus could do everything, Yeshua, why didn't he just jump off the cross and do this and say, hey, you know, bang, bang, and put the Romans to rest and, you know, clean up Judaism and all that stuff? Because he couldn't. He had to obey and drink the cup to clear us. He had to be the Joseph, the one who was willing to sacrifice himself for his brethren, the one who redeemed his brethren, the kinsman redeemer, and saved Benjamin, the son of the right hand. Now, the last role of the Messiah, like it says in Isaiah 11:11, he's going to do it a second time. He's going to save his people. He saved them first time. Now he's going to save them the second time. This is the return of the Messiah as the king, the lion of the tribe of Judah, the son of David, the Mashiach ben David. And when he comes as the king, he'll have no such restraint. He will have a rod of iron, a sword that will cut asunder right from wrong, true from false, good from evil, yada, 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 on and on. And recompense in the day of the wrath of the Lord will come, and the king will reign forever. And now you have a picture of all three aspects, the triune nature of the Messiah, Yeshua, and his job, his function. You got to get it. And then he says again, I'm going to take the cover away. I can't be the Lion of Judah until all of this happens and in my second return. Now, let's get into something that we need to understand. We know that these names that we read, Uz, Philistine, Ashkelon, Azah, Ekron, Ashdod, Edom, Moab, Ammon, Tyrus, Zidon. Tyrus and Zidon are the same as Tyre and Sidon, where Jezebel comes from. Remember? And the kings of the isles, and Dedan and Tema and Buz, and Arabia, and Zimri, and Elam, and the Medes. Those 18 names, which are the number and the names of bondage, evil. Well, now what do? What do we do in this ministry? We go in and we dig it out and we say, what do these names mean? Do they tell a story? What are we learning here? Is it consistent? How can we prove what's going on in the black and white that we read and what's going on under the surface? So, those names, and I'm going to show you, and I'm going to read to you what they mean, forward and backward. In other words, from Uz all the way down to the last one, Medes. And then in reverse, we're going to read it. And we're going to, I hope, get an appreciation for the consistency and the harmony and the perfection of this word. You see, folks, at the end of the day, all this great, cool stuff that we find out and we learn and we do the research for, it doesn't mean anything if you don't get it. The whole point here is to study. And when you study, and you study the way I've been hoping to convey to you and help you through, you cannot help but know that this Bible is the Word of God. You got to be a real knucklehead if you don't see it. Excuse my English. But like I said, there's a sense of urgency. Take a look around you. What's going on? Take a look. You know, by the way, if you are wondering about the configuration of nations and what's going on in Russia and the Ukraine and all this other stuff, believe me, the weakness that's perceived here by our rivals, let's say, is something that they must act upon. Don't be confused by the news. I've told you I've been in this business a long time. It's a distraction. The Ukraine has as much wealth, mineral resource wealth, the second most in the entire world. The first is in the Dead Sea in Israel. These are the things most coveted because these are the things that control not only technology, but the means of production. Communism seeks to control the means of production, which I told you about, the workers, the laborers, that's one. Then gold, oil, natural gas, foodstuffs, and pure water, drinkable water. United States leads in pretty much all of those five. But all the mineral resources that other nations have openly said that they want to get, all right, have to do with the reality of what's going on. Russia really doesn't care about us, and they need to go ahead into Ukraine, not because of the United States, but they will try to reconstitute the entire global position of the former Soviet Union and the landmass, because the Ukraine is this big and Russia's this big, okay? And it has nothing to do with the United States at the end of the day, other than to expose our weakness at this point, which, again, is also planned. The reality is that if they don't do what they have to do there, as they are claiming to do, then China will establish a worldwide dominance or a hegemony in the region. Russia can't allow a neighbor as close as China, because guess what? When we're sitting there doing nothing, twiddling our thumbs, guess who's the next target for China? Little Russia. Okay? That's how it goes. Hegemony. It means controlling interest, power, a power broker in a region. You can't have one, all right? But that's the goal. So that's why they're doing what they're doing. It's more of an offset for China than it is the United States. But I told you, these things all play into prophecy, all play into Ezekiel, all play into everything that we've talked about leading up to Revelation. So I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to mention these things. And I hope you go test it on it, all right? As I told you, I've been in that business for over 42 years. And it makes perfect sense strategically, tactically, militarily, economically, and most importantly, biblically. Okay? All right. So now, having said those things, having seen the configuration of nations in this chapter, Jeremiah 25, where they are, who they are today, okay? Now we're going to find out what their names mean. And I'm going to read to you from top to bottom first, from Uz to Medes, and then in reverse order, so that you can see the consistency and the harmony again of how these things are placed here. No human could have done this. No Cray computer could have done this. So here we go. The meaning of those names are as follows. Babylon is measured by Jehovah, who is eternal forever. He is hidden and praiseworthy, and the desert nomads despised and plundered in the southern country. Just like it said when we read it before. The north and the Babylonians are going to go against the south. What did it just say here? They are slowly led to the hunting place, to the distress of the tribal people and their kinsmen. And he says, who is your father, Esau? I will spoil the stronghold of the powerful. I will uproot them, exterminate them, and there will be barrenness where she was strong. In the fire of infamy, she wallows in the counsel of her own words. My goodness. How could you ever imagine that those names are placed right in that spot, one after the other, have meanings, and together they say that. Now, let's look at it from the bottom to the top, and we'll read it that way. She wallows in the counsel of her own words. In the fire of infamy she was strong, but there will be barrenness, and I will exterminate and uproot them. The stronghold of the powerful I will spoil. Who is your father, Esau? The kinsmen and the tribal peoples are in distress, and they are slowly led to this hunting place. It's a killing place. The southern country was plundered and despised by the desert nomads, but he is hidden and praiseworthy, the eternal, forever. Jehovah measures Babylon. It's even more powerful from bottom to top. It's at these kind of points in time where I'm very rarely lost for words, be that as it may. All right? Be that as it may. I can't imagine in all my dreamings and daydreams or anything how any man could have put that there without direct divine inspiration, the Word of God himself. Who could do it? If anything, if you've learned nothing of any of these studies, and if you've not heard any of them, this one solitary chapter in the book of the prophet Jeremiah gives us all this information. All this information. And you see an entire picture of how God has actually talked to his people. He begged them. He says, please don't do these things. I ask you, don't put these false gods. Don't do this. How many times we listened as children or teenagers or adolescents growing up where our parents begged us not to do certain things in our own rebellious way, in our own stupid way. We did what we wanted to. Come hell or high water, we were going to do and be who we wanted to do and be. Well, you get in trouble, or you get away with it, or you get punished, or whatever happens, or you create enmity between you and your parents at some point. It's happened to all of us. We grow that way until we learn. Well, God's saying the same thing, but he's saying it from an eternal perspective, a huge global perspective. Why have you done this? You, my own people, in my own city, Jerusalem. Well, you ain't going to get away with it. And he lays it out. Then he says, and it's not just you, it's the whole world. And it's these particular nations right here that he mentions again in Ezekiel that will attack Israel, that will betray Israel. All these pacts that they're making, everything, that's great. All right? There will be a betrayal, an overwhelming one. And he says it, and he shows us all the future prophecy. And everything that we studied in Revelation now comes right into focus. And he points directly to it. So there are many, many places in the Word just like this. It may be that you'll find one, or he'll lead you to study one. The point is, I want you to study this way. I want you to make this yours. Okay? I want to challenge you, like I challenge myself every day, to learn, to prove, to go back, to validate. It takes time and hard work. But, like Tom Hanks said in the movie A League of Their Own, when the star player said, oh, it's just too hard. And he said, if it was easy, everybody'd be doing it. Well, you know what? It is hard until it becomes easy. And it becomes easy when the desire builds to know and to want to be and to have that walk, or to want that understanding. Not just to have understanding and knowledge, but to be able to apply the knowledge, to make it intelligence, to make it truth, to make it wisdom, to get closer to God, which is what we're supposed to be doing. Will we achieve it? Only when he returns, only when we're transformed, just like Yeshua was transformed. Okay? He became one with God. He was of one mind and one spirit when he was here. But in a bodily form, we can't be. We must be transformed and reconciled. Okay? Kephar. God will reconcile everything to him. He will cover and atone like you would cancel a debt. He ransoms us. He makes a purchase. That's what the Messiah did. Okay? In the Greek, the word reconcile is a complete transference from one condition to another, removing all enmity, leaving all hindrances out of the way. Any hindrances to peace and unity, as it says in Colossians and Ephesians. We talked about it the other day. It's all removed. It must be removed. And that's what happens when we get really deep in the Word. Okay? Are you going to learn it all? No. None of us are. It's way beyond what we can ever, way beyond. Okay? Way beyond. But what does happen is you learn, and these things can be revealed such that you can apply them, such that you can hold on to them. Because when things get tough, and they're gonna, you will have the eternal hope that the Messiah says, I'm coming for a second time. All this other stuff's going to happen, but I'm pulling my people out. We learned about that. Remember, it says that the punishment was upon those that held the mark of the beast, okay, on the earth, from whatever nation, from whatever peoples. But he says specifically, those that have the mark of the beast and worship the image. All the rest are gone. Gone. Anyway, I hope this was a little bit informative. Yeah, it's meant to shake us up. We need it. We need to get serious. We need to understand that there is a sense of urgency and that we are in it. He's coming. Things are happening very rapidly in the world, and days are upon us. So listen, God bless until next week. These will be up here and ready to go, and I hope that they speak to you and we learn something, and that we can grasp this a little bit tighter and hold on to it a little bit tighter as well. God bless until next week.